All right, so welcome to week 11 of the semester. I can't believe we've made it this far into the semester. We're really close to Thanksgiving break now, so try to keep up the good work. With that being said, I know we're really to the absolute hectic point of the semester. So if there's ever anything you need, whether it's some kind of extension, further explanation of materials, really just anything I can help you out with, please reach out to me. But anyway, so for week 11, we're going to be talking about resumes. So whether this is a process that you're really familiar with, if you've crafted a resume before, or whether or not you've never really made one before, you haven't in a really long time, this is always a really helpful topic to revisit because it's kind of deceptively simple. Sometimes these shorter documents that we have to fit a lot of information on can be really difficult than longer documents. So we're going to go over some strategies for making resumes, proofreading them, different kinds of resumes, and things like that. So you really want to focus on customizing your resume, and this is something we're going to work on over the next couple weeks. So obviously, as I'm sure you all know, it's no secret, today's job market is really competitive. The focus isn't so much on what an applicant wants, but what the employer needs. So your resume should be customized to fit specific companies and positions, So you want to make sure that if you're applying to, say, 4 different jobs, you have 4 different versions of your resume that each cater to that specific position or company, whatever it is you're applying for. This is because a lot of applications are sent in and a lot of recruiters are finding candidates on job-seeking websites, and those are decided by algorithms. So a position can receive like thousands of applicants for a single position, so you want to make sure yours is customized, as detailed as possible, so yours stands out from the crowd. Choosing a resume style. So this would be kind of the first step you take in crafting a resume. So while I said that your resume needs to be customized to a position, obviously to begin, you're just going to make it standard, represent yourself, and then you'll go back and kind of mold it based on what kind of job listing or position you find. But first you're going to choose a resume style. And there are 2 different kinds. So first is chronological. This is probably what you're more used to. If you've made a resume before, you've probably made it in this style. You've probably seen them in this style. So a chronological resume is going to list work history in reverse order, starting with the most recent. Chronological resumes are good because they really quickly reveal an applicant's education and experience, so it can be really useful since recruiters are kind of going through such a high volume of resumes and applications. This is really straight and to the point. Here's what you have to offer, sending it out on the table right away. Works really well for candidates who have experience in their field and show steady career growth. So if you've already had a job or several jobs that relate really closely to whatever position you're applying for, a chronological resume is probably a good choice because you can show a recruiter right off the bat that you've worked with this type of position before, or you have some really applicable experience. For people who don't have that kind of extensive experience, you might prefer a functional resume. So a functional resume is going to focus on a candidate's skills rather than employment. So rather than a header like work experience, you would kind of divide it up into headers of different skill sets you might have or experiences that you've had that aren't necessarily work related. A functional resume is going to highlight accomplishments and de-emphasize a negative employment history. So this can be really useful for someone who, just graduated school and has never had a job in their chosen field. It can be really helpful for people who have large employment gaps for whatever reason, or people who are switching to a completely new career field from the one they were in before. So one isn't necessarily inherently better than the other. It's really just applicable to your context and what do you think is going to represent you the best. Oh, again, functional, good for candidates with gaps in employment history. So once you've chosen your resume type, whether you choose chronological or functional, you want to start thinking about resume categories. And the textbook provides some kind of standard effective resume categories. And these are a main heading, career objective, and we'll break all these down in just a minute. So optional summary of qualifications. We'll get into why that is optional and where it might be useful. Education, work experience or employment history, capabilities and skills, awards, honors, and activities, and another optional one is personal data and references. And we'll break that down a little further here in a few minutes. First, we'll start with main heading. It's pretty simple. Always begin a resume with your name. Seems really obvious, but when you're making these kind of high-stress documents that have a lot of info, sometimes it's easy to forget this really basic stuff. So make sure you format your name to stand out on the page, whether it's in a different font that's like complementary to the other one you use, whether it's in a box on the page, whether it's, bolded, indented, italicized, excuse me. You want to make sure that it stands out, that someone can clearly tell, okay, this is Joe Schmo's resume. Following your name, you'll include your address. Now this is optional. A lot of people leave this out for privacy reasons, especially since resumes and stuff kind of float around LinkedIn and Indeed and everything. If you want to put it, it's fine. It's not necessarily taboo, but it's not totally the norm anymore. So it's really up to you. Your phone number should definitely be included. Make sure it's a number that you pick up often. Make sure that your voicemail box is set up and that you're available to receive messages. Email address, a personal email address. Don't use one that you already have for a workplace or something. And make sure it's appropriate. Again, seems obvious, but you'd be surprised. And your LinkedIn profile, if applicable. So if you have a LinkedIn profile, feel free to include the link to that profile. Yeah, and there's your main heading. Pretty straightforward. The resume gallery in the textbook has some good examples if you want to look at that. Next would be your career objective. So not every expert, not every recruiter agrees that you should include a career objective, but if you do, it needs to be really specific. So again, whether or not you choose to include one is kind of your preference or based on the context and how you want to represent yourself. But if you're going to make one, make sure it's really aimed at something specific. It's good to use strategic keywords from the job listing. So if there are certain responsibilities or qualifications listed in the job listing, make sure that you just kind of take them and recycle them and put them in your objective. So the textbook had a couple examples of a poor career objective and a positive one. So we're just going to go through that real quick. A poor objective would be to obtain a position with a well-established organization that will lead to a lasting relationship in the field of marketing. That's really vague. It's pretty throwaway, forgettable. An improved objective would be to obtain a position that capitalizes on my recent training in business writing and marketing to boost customer contacts and expand brand penetration using my social media expertise. So this names really specific skills, really specific experiences, and includes nouns that were likely listed in the job listing. So that's going to be more likely be pulled out by sort of a job listing site's algorithm or a recruiter. Next, Next facet of resume sections would be a summary of your qualifications. So I've included this because here you don't want to be afraid to talk yourself up a little bit. A summary of qualifications is often a replacement for the career objective. Some experts think you don't necessarily have to include both. Again, it's kind of preference. If you want to play around with it, it's something we can workshop and work through. But your summary of qualifications ensures that your most impressive qualities are not quickly overlooked. So this would be 3 to 8 bulleted statements that prove you're the ideal candidate right off the bat. Just like a quick list of, your straightforward skill sets, experiences you've had, things that really set you apart from the rest of the candidates right from the get-go. Next would be education. So put education before the work experience section only if it's more noteworthy. So if you don't have a lot of work experience related to the position you're applying for, go ahead and put your education beforehand so you can show whatever recruiter is looking at your resume that while you may not have the work experience, you have a degree and an education that's going to be applicable to the work you do in this position. So in this section, you would include the name and location of the schools you've gone to, dates of attendance, and major fields of study and degrees received. So I just have an example here. It's from my resume. Bachelor of Arts in English, minor in Communication Studies, Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville, Illinois, May 2017. So you can kind of play around with the order of these things as long as it flows logically, but you just want to make sure that all of that information is there. Optional under education, you could include your GPA only if you feel like it's going to be applicable. It's not necessarily a common practice. Might be a good choice for certain positions, but it's by no means expected. Some positions might... Sorry, my dog is joining in on this. Some positions might be interested in something like a GRE score. But again, that's not really a common practice. That's something you'd more so take in applying to graduate school, not really a professional position. And if you feel like it's going to be applicable, you could list what courses you've taken in college. But again, that's not really typical, and you'd only want to do that if you've taken a really specific course and gotten some really specific applicable experience. Next up would be work experience or employment history. Whatever you'd want to call this section, either one is pretty common. So kind of like education, if this is relevant to the position taught, put it before education. Basically, whichever section you think makes you look like a better candidate, go ahead and put that first. List most recent work experience and work backward, and include only relevant positions. So a job application is going to ask you to list like full employment history, but with a resume you can be a little more choosy and pick things that are only applicable to the position you're applying for. Feel free to include recent volunteer work. A lot of recruiters really like to see this, and it can be kind of a nice cushion if you don't necessarily have a lot of work experience. For each position, you'll list the employer's name, city, and state, dates of employment, that includes month and year, your most important job title, so what were you called, what was your highest ranking position, significant duties, activities, accomplishments, and promotions. There are some good examples of this, again, in the resume gallery in the textbook, or there's tons of good examples of resumes online. If you need help finding one, I'm more than happy to help you out. Work experience, employment history continued. Customize your information so it relates to the target job. So when you're making a resume for that really specific job listing, make sure you're really playing up the skill sets you've gotten in previous work experience that's going to help you in the position you're applying for. Bullet points listing your responsibilities, duties, achievements at different jobs should be concise, but they don't necessarily have to be complete sentences. They usually don't include personal pronouns, so try to avoid I, me, and my, and be really specific. So a couple examples from the textbook. A poor listing of experience you had at a job would be worked with customers. It's really vague. Again, kind of forgettable. An improved version of that would be developed superior customer service skills by successfully interacting with 40 plus customers daily. This gives a recruiter a much more concrete idea of what you were actually doing in this position, and notice it quantifies your experience, which is really important. That gives recruiters a really solid idea of what you've done and what you're capable of doing. So whenever you have the chance to add a number there, go ahead and do it. Again, quantify whenever possible. A poor example, did equipment study and report. Improved, conducted research and wrote final study analyzing equipment needs of 100 small businesses in Houston. That seems way more tangible and way more impressive than did equipment study and report. And don't forget to showcase your interpersonal capabilities. So employers aren't just looking for technical skills, they're looking for team players, hard workers. So an example of this would be, a poor example, joined in team efforts on campus, while an improved would be headed 16-member student government team that conducted the most successful voter registration in campus history. So try to be specific. Try to give recruiters a really solid idea of what you've actually done. It's a good idea to include action verbs here. I'm not going to go through all of these. This is also in the textbook, but these are some really good examples of words you can use when you kind of find yourself stuck using the same verb over and over again. And they've categorized it with things like communication skills, management or leadership skills. So this is a really good thing to go back to when you're creating this section of your resume. Next up is capabilities and skills. So when you're listing your capabilities and skills, you want to use expressions like proficient in, competent in, experienced in, and ability to. So a poor example of that would be have writing experience, whereas improved would be competent in writing, editing, and proofreading reports, tables, letters, memos, emails, manuscripts, and business forms. Again, it just goes back to that notion of being as specific as possible, quantifying things, giving recruiters that concrete idea of what you've done and what you're going to be able to bring to the table for this position. And go ahead and highlight exceptional aptitudes. So if you're really good at working with teams or you're really good at making sales, go ahead and include that too. But again, try to be specific, and if you can quantify something, go ahead and do it. Next would be awards, honors, and activities. If you have 3 or more awards, honors, go ahead and create a separate section. If you don't have that many, you can still include these, but go ahead and put them under a different section like education or work experience, wherever they might fit in better. So this section can include things like awards, scholarships, fellowships, whether or not you made the dean's list, honors, any recognition, commendation, or certificate that you've received. Just make sure that you identify these items clearly. So not everyone is going to know what, say, a specific club on campus was. You need to explain it to them. So for example, a poor example of this would be recipient of STAR Award. A recruiter could look at this and say, okay, that's great, you want an award, but I have no idea what that is. So you'd want to offer some context by saying something like, recipient of STAR Award given by Pepperdine University to outstanding graduates who combine academic excellence and extracurricular activities. Just gives the recruiter more context on what exactly this accomplishment or honor was. Optional sections are personal data and references. So as far as personal data goes, Don't include data like birth date, marital status, national origin, religious affiliation, anything like that. That's not required. It's actually illegal for a recruiter or an interviewer to ask you that, so there's no need to include that anywhere on your resume. If it's relevant, you can include your hobbies or interests. Say you're applying for a company that really values an outdoor lifestyle, and you really love to ski, that might actually be really applicable and it might set you apart. So if you feel like it's relevant or it's going to give you an edge, consider including it. And references. So there's not actually a need to include these. A lot of us have included references available upon request or something, but a lot of recruiters actually feel like these take up valuable space where you could include more things that are actually applicable to the position. Instead, recruiters suggest that you bring a list of individuals willing to discuss your qualifications to the interview. So you would type up your references as if you were going to put them in the resume, but instead you just print them and bring them to the interview. So there's no need to include references, no need to say references available upon request. Polishing your resume. This is really, really important. This is one of the documents that you want to make sure you proofread and then proofread and then proofread again and then have someone else proofread it for you. It's a really good idea to study other resumes for formatting ideas. Like I said, we've got the resume gallery in the textbook. There's tons of websites with good examples. There's templates, all sorts of places on the internet. Again, if you are having trouble locating a good example, or you're just feeling kind of lost, reach out to me. I have some examples I can show you. I'm happy to help. Use techniques to improve readability. So how can you kind of change up capitalization, underlining, indenting, bulleting to make important information stand out, and make it really aesthetically pleasing, something that's going to maybe catch a recruiter's eye. Experiment with headings and styles. Try out different templates, try out different titles for your heading, and be careful to eliminate wordiness. So a poor example would be a skill supervised 2 employees who worked at the counter, whereas a better example would be supervised 2 counter employees. Says the same thing, just more concise, easier to absorb, reaches the point much quicker. Maximizing the rank of your resume. So these are some important tips given the fact that so many resumes are now submitted online and so many jobs get so many resumes submitted to them. So include specific keywords or phrases in context. So it's okay to take language from a job ad and just recycle it into your resume. It's going to help the algorithm for a job searching site pick up on your resume over others. Focus on nouns. So we talked about action verbs. Those are really good for the person reading your resume, but to get it to stand out in an algorithm or on a website, you want to focus on nouns. So what nouns are listed in the job ad, as far as, job titles, skill sets, make sure you're taking those and recycling them when applicable. Use variations of the job title. So algorithms might label jobs differently. So maybe use abbreviations, different words throughout the resume when applicable for certain positions you've had. Concentrate on the skills section. Like I said, employers really want technical skills, but they also really want interpersonal skills. So see how you might be able to work that out to where you can reflect both. Keep the formatting simple. So you want it to be aesthetically pleasing. You want to play around with design ideas, but you don't want it to be flashy. You don't want it to be confusing or cluttered or anything like that. Use conventional headings. So if you're listing what kind of jobs you've had, keep it to work experience or work history. Don't try to come up with a fancy new title, because if no one has heard of it before, a system on a website isn't going to pick it up. So up next, go ahead and post to the Week 11 discussion board. There you'll find a couple examples of resumes and a few questions that ask you to critique both examples. After that, go ahead and read the standard resume assignment prompt. We're going to get started this week just creating a kind of standard baseline resume where you can kind of play around with these techniques, strategies from the textbook. And then next week, we'll kind of work on catering them to a really specific job or position. So obviously, after you've read the prompt, go ahead and complete and turn in the standard resume assignment. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, send me an email, set up a meeting, whatever. I know everything is high stress right now, so however I can help, I would love to. I apologize if you can hear my dog in the background right now. He is very upset that he's not part of this, and we're playing tug of war right now. But anyway, have a great week. I'll be in touch, and let me know if you need anything. Thanks.